Hello everyone, Ruby Ravel here, a winged bird goddess from the Van Allen belt, soaring with albatross in the stratosphere, here to talk to you today about Venus square Uranus. In mythology and folklore, it is an essential part of the narratives that at some point the protagonist will encounter beings from other world. He might encounter dwarves and other phonic beings from the underworld. He might encounter mermaids and sea monsters from the ocean. But no creature from the other world is quite as disruptive to the affairs of everyday beings as those who come from the sky, who descend from the heavens and change our lives forever. For instance, if we look at biblical narratives of visitations with angels, they differ very much from the prettified notion that we have of angels in modern culture, where they're all very mild and tepid and benign. To be visited by an angel in the Bible made you akin to a prophet. Even if it was a very fleeting experience, it had the potential to be illuminating and awakening and deeply shocking and surprising, because it changed your conception and relationship with reality forever. Angels would seldom announce their arrival in cozy, warm, nourishing ways. They wouldn't send you a letter and say, by the way, I'm going to pop in for tea cakes and muffins a little later, have the kettle on the stove. No, they just suddenly fucking appear out of nowhere in this blaze of conscious fire, and they do not come haphazardly with no purpose, but usually conveying a specific message, a power, a revelation to let you know that soon a new utopia will come, a new Jerusalem will come, or that a great day of wrath is coming. They don't tend to deal in middle grounds. They are creatures of extremes with prophecies that are reassuring you that the world you know in some way is going to be altered and changed forever. And I say all this because the way that the planet Uranus works is very much the same. He brings us those shocks, those surprises, those upheavals straight from the heavens. And if we look at how some of the prophets in the Bibles respond to these biblical visitations with angels, often it is deeply shocking and distressing to their humanity and to their nervous system, because what they've experienced has challenged their senses and the threshold of what it is that they can understand. Most of them were just going about their everyday business. Bam! Suddenly an angel happens and they are never the same again. Some of them go through periods of insanity, madness, and psychosis where their normal senses have been so awakened and pushed beyond the envelope that they are now aware of sensory and psychic experiences that they were not open or receptive to before. The everyday world that they once took for granted is now seen from a heightened cosmic lens. In the case of the prophet Enoch, he was actually taken by the angels and granted a tour of the solar system. So the reason why Uranus as an ambassador or ambassadress of the heavens is so shocking to our humanity is that, unlike the envoys of the other elements, he deals with facets that transcend and go beyond the limits of everyday humanity. When we have meetings with dwarves and elves and demons who reside below the earth, they are still dealing with everyday human experiences, with the gold and the wealth and the dangers that exist in those underworldly realms beyond us. When we are encountering mermaids and sea creatures and nereids and nymphs, we are still dealing with human emotions, dreams and yearnings and fascinations. But once we start dealing with those Uranian deities in the sky, we are having something that is pulling us away from the ground, away from the earth, away from the safety and security of everything we've known, and lifting us up into the air and taking us into places that expand our mind, but also which make no sense to us because they are truly exotic, they are truly unearthly and otherworldly, and that takes time to digest and become accepted to. So if you are just walking along, having a nice little stroll through a summer meadow, and suddenly something picks you up without any warning and carries you up into the sky, your first response is going to be one of terror and shock. Even if previously you've had dreams of yearnings about what it would be like to be a bird, to be carried up aloft into the ether, to see the sky from that heightened perspective and to have the freedom to fly instead of always being grounded and rooted. If that comes unannounced, you are going to be shocked and you are not necessarily going to welcome the experience. Your fight and flight mode is going to be sending off, your adrenaline will be coursing through your system, and all you know is that just suddenly you are taken away from where you were, that the stability of standing on Earth has been lost from you. And yet once you acclimatize to that experience, and instead of just stop screaming about the terror of what it would be like to fall, you can relax into the arms of the angel or the sacred albatross that is carrying you and look down on the world below and say, there's so much here and so much more than I could have perceived have I just committed to my earthly worldview. There is a world beyond this one, but also even within this world, there is a grander network and whole caniculi of different interconnections that did not exist for me before. It's like instead of being the creature on the map, we have been pulled out of the map so that we can see the whole thing as a revelation of a unified cosmic picture in which all of those day-to-day little details and elements we interact with rather meaninglessly is shown to be all different atoms making up a larger unified experience of the cosmos. So like when Enoch gets taken up and no doubt screamed and shat himself at first, he was granted this expanded astronomical view of the universe to see what the heavens and worlds look like beyond this one. And it was that revelation that enabled him to be a prophet, because then he could share this expanded, unified view with other people. And this is what Uranus wants us to experience. He wants us to go beyond the limitations of our everyday values, our everyday way of relating to people, and to take flight and go into different realms. So what effect does Uranus have on Venus when they're in a square relationship with one another? Well, Venus governs our values, our loves, our likes, our preferences, what we feel is worthwhile and of matter and moment to us, what gives us pleasure and delight in the world, what we find beautiful, stylish, elegant, graceful, pleasing to our mind and to our senses. Venus is how we choose to decorate the world and impart it with more of our own particular personality. If you want to get in touch with your own Venus and figure out what you value, I think a good way to start is to ask yourself, if you could build your dream home and were granted carte blanche to do so, how would you do it? And all of the different ways in which you would personalize it and make it an expression of your own heartfelt values will reveal to you a bit more about yourself. You might even say to yourself, I don't like the idea of having a fixed home or being in a fixed structure. I might prefer a nomadic lifestyle, and therein you have had a little more of your Venus reflected back to you in terms of how you would like to paint the world in your own image, or just even how you would like to paint and express yourself. This is what Venus governs. And it is important for all of us to have a sense of Venus, as that can, if the sun represents our self, then Venus is how we choose to dress that self, how we choose to colorize it, how we choose to express it in a more creative way that separates us from the rest of the mass of the universe. And these things are very important, because when we are getting to know someone, when we are relating to someone, if we're going on a first date with someone, very often we are interested in discovering what those values are. We ask someone what their favorite color is. what their favourite films are, what their favourite bands are, what their favourite foods are. Because even though most of these things are relatively ordinary, banal, everyday things, those answers are symbolic of a deeper part of that person's character. If someone tells us that they like extreme death metal, then we might think this is someone who values passion, aggression, high energy, and emotional intensity. Likewise, we might meet someone who tells us that they love jazz, and from that we could deduce that they appreciate spontaneity, that they are perhaps quite a cerebral person, but who enjoys the prospect of living in the moment and allowing passion to be something that arises spontaneously out of the moment, who doesn't like things to be too set and structured, but who enjoys the fluidity and mutability of flowing along with the unexpected in life and welcoming whatever it brings to us. So these little things can be of massive importance, and I'm sure we've all had those experiences of meeting someone for the first time or going on a date with someone for the first time and finding that they love something we hate, or that they are totally indifferent to all the things that we love, and coming to a conclusion thereby that this isn't going to work, because in order for us to be able to connect and bond together, there has to be some point of mutuality. There has to be something that we can both say, yes, this is beautiful, this is pleasing. Let's make the world a more pleasurable, beautiful place by enjoying this thing together. But the problem with these values, with these likes and dislikes, is sometimes that they can become a bit too rigid, too narrow, too ossified. We can think that we've explored enough of the universe and say, yeah, you know what, I'm this or that age, I've had these or that experiences, I know myself, I know what I like and dislike, I know the kinds of things that please me, I know what displeases me, I know the types of people I want in my life, I know the types of people I don't want in my life. And that can be a very comforting, reassuring thing to know, because the world is comprised of infinity. And every day we are wrestling and engaging with infinity. So when we narrow it down to a finite lens and say, I like this, I don't like that, I know I want this, I know I don't want that, life becomes more easy and manageable to engage with, because then we therefore know what it is that we are seeking to acquire, what we are seeking to people and ornament our life with. There is a chosen path for us that we can follow as an objective to get where we want, or to be with the people that we want. But sometimes we can get a bit too settled in these comfort zones, because all of our likes and dislikes and values and preferences are based exclusively on what we have already experienced. And there can be a tendency then to shut out anything that is new or novel or groundbreaking, because it threatens this nice cozy value of systems that we've already constructed. Like I said, if we know who we are and what we want, the life is much easier to navigate and traverse. But as soon as we admit that there is a room for error there, that there is uncertainty, that there might be some place in which we are unfulfilled and unilluminated, then a change is necessary. And this is where Uranus comes in to challenge us and to push us, usually very rudely and abruptly, from these comfort zones. He can see Venus there in her living room, reclining on her chaise longue, eating her favourite foods, admiring her favourite paintings, watching the same old favourite TV shows, and thinks, yeah, that looks very comfy, that looks very nice, but it's also not going anywhere. There's no movement, there's no progression, there's no evolution. Uranus wants things to constantly be moving and reaching higher towards the heavens. And if everything's just a bit too settled, a bit too neat, then there is no potential for the growth of the human soul. So Uranus says, well, you know, if I just keep Venus let her just carry on living there, surrounded by all these things that she loves, she's never going to open up to new sides of her character. She's never going to open up to new sides of life. She might never open up to people who could radically improve her life, who could be the loves of her life, but which right now she wouldn't be receptive to, because she thinks They're not her type. They're not the kind of people that she wants around. They will not offer her the kind of experiences that she really wants. But I am Uranus. I can see deeper into her character than she is willing to admit. Uranus is the key holder of the unopened parts of our soul. You know, we are all personal, finite beings, and yet can be conduits for the impersonal and for the infinite. And so, in order to become the people we are, in order to individuate ourselves, we've had to close certain doors. We've had to lock certain things behind and say, this is not me, defining ourselves by negative space. But Uranus comes along and says, well, actually, what if you are one of those things you've defined yourself as not being? What if you do want the things you've always thought you don't wanted? What happens if this door that has been closed is suddenly opened? Who knows what will come through? Follow me as your Sephirim, and we will find out together, whether you want to or not, because that is the nature of the square, in that Uranus may open us up to things that we don't necessarily feel ready to explore, that we don't want to explore, that we are afraid of admitting might be a part of ourselves. And there is that push-pull between wanting to cling to what is safe and secure and known and pleasant versus that restlessness and that fervid excitement that says, actually, there has to be more to myself than what I've decided. And I'm afraid of exploring that because it feels like I'm leaping off the ground into the unknown, and yet there will be a part of myself that will forever be left in the darkness unless I'm willing to follow this path of illumination and discover that I may be a stranger to myself. Now, let's say, for instance, your sexuality may be broader and different from what you are used to and what you are accustomed to. You may have spent your whole life attracted to just one particular gender or sex. And yet, if you were to become aware that maybe you're actually attracted to different types of people, or that there are types of relationship experiences that you have previously closed yourself off to, that can be very scary and threatening, because it means having to start from scratch. It means having to learn to fly in an area where we've only been able to walk. It means opening up to things that we have no previous knowledge in. And that can be scary, because to change your sexuality or to change your gender is to change the way you relate to people and have to learn to relate to people in a wholly different way. And that can be scary, it can be terrifying, it can be ungrounding, but it can also make us feel alive, because there is the raw electricity of responding to something totally new and feeling a part of ourselves awaken that has formerly been asleep. And of course, this doesn't always have to be extreme. How this aspect plays out really depends on where these two planets are distributed in the houses of your chart. You know, sometimes the only change that Uranus demands from us is a much more internal one, which can sometimes be the most radical, to demand these shifts in how we look at the world. You know, sometimes it's just a case of opening up to new philosophies, new ideas, new religions, new spiritualities, new psychological and perceptive states, exploring different places, opening up to different types of music, reading novels that you might not ordinarily meet, socialize with people who are very different from the ones you would normally meet. Other times it's much more shocking. If Uranus is manifesting in an earthy sign or house, then sometimes we can find that we have to move home or change jobs, or that a relationship ends. And at the time, we may only feel the shock of something that is precious and secure and pleasing to us being taken away from us and being stripped from our fingers. And yet later on, as the freedom from those attachments enables us to move on and have new experiences that are actually more fulfilling to who we are now, we might be grateful. You know, we might lose one home and then move into a place where we're actually much happier. We might lose one relationship that we have become very comfortable in, and find another one that is actually fulfilling us and making us feel reborn and reawakened and new and young and vital again in ways we never thought we would experience again at this point in our lives. We might be kicked out of one job only to find that there is another that grants us more fluidity and freedom, which is more expressive of our higher values. So the shock of being kicked out of somewhere familiar that Uranus may have to bring us if our lives are too ossified and static can often be very unwelcome. And we have to have that prophetic ability to see in the future, to realize that there may be a divine purpose to this cosmos, that we are being kicked out of the nest so that we can learn to fly. So that instead of just being bound to this one small space, the rest of the world can now be ours. Venus-Uranus aspects can often bring us into contact with new people who can serve as these ambassadors in their own way. If there is a part of ourselves or a part of our value system that we have been denying or have been afraid of exploring, under this aspect it's not unusual to meet people who can almost be the living representatives and symbols of a side of ourselves that we have left unopened, untraveled, unlooked at. And through meeting a hidden secret value of ours, personified as a living person or experience, it's almost like we're being granted a teacher, a guide, an authority on this illumination. If there's something we've wanted to try but it never felt possible, if we meet someone who is living a lifestyle or a set of values, it, in a very real way, it makes it more possible to us, it makes it more approachable to us. And then we therefore think, this is something I could actually try or take on myself. It doesn't always have to be a radical thing, like I said. Sometimes just seeing someone dressing in a way that you really like but might not have had the courage to try yourself can say, oh yeah, I see how they're doing it, I see the way they've done their makeup, I can ask them where they get their clothes, I can try a little bit of that myself. But you can see whether this manifests itself on a very extreme disruptive level or on a much more internal one. The whole point of Venus square Uranus is to make us more inclusive of whatever we have shut out, to open more doors instead of leaving them closed, to explore more of the unknown universe. Because while Venus represents what is personal, Uranus represents what is impersonal, what is part of the greater hive mind of the entirety of the cosmos, rather than just being the expression of one particular person's hearts and values and likes and dislikes. So part of the experience of Venus square Uranus is being asked to be more open and receptive to the progressive new influences that are arising out there in the world. Instead of shutting yourself off from any modern movements or trends or unexperienced parts of life, instead you look at these things and you say, yeah, there might be a little bit of me in these new things, there might be a little bit of me in these new trends, there might be experiences that could revitalize me and bring a part of myself into my life that I've previously rejected. And maybe I've rejected those things because either I've been afraid of being too much like other people if I do become receptive to these mass movements, or we might have rejected certain parts of our value system that are a bit more eccentric or non-conformative and non-conventional or divergent because we're afraid that if I truly express these things, then people will reject me, that I will be isolated and exiled from the collective. But the restlessness of Venus square Uranus says, no, I need to try these things, and I need to try them now. At some point, this mortal vehicle will die, and I will be dying prematurely if I do not welcome the possibility of reinvention, of evolution, of progress, of new life into my life. And the best way to welcome new life into your life, if you've been feeling a bit too stagnant and old and aged before your time, is to say, yeah, fuck it, let's bring in the new. Let's welcome in something that I've never tried before. And then I can try a new part of myself that I've never experienced before. And then the world will be a bigger place. There will be more things that I can now relate to than before, because I will have had that personal experience. So sometimes we might, if we're single, we might go on dates with people who are unlike our usual types during this period, and whether those relationships develop or not, they can still have exposed us to a different way of relating. They can still have given us a little bit of data that can help illuminate and define and clarify what it is that we actually do want, because Uranus likes to experiment, and he realizes the only way we can derive true self-knowledge is by throwing ourselves into different, totally new, novel situations, seeing what works and seeing what doesn't, and then reflecting and analysing and using that to define where our hearts truly want to go next. I think one of the things that really defines how shocking, disruptive, pleasant or unpleasant we find the Venus-Uranus square aspect is dependent on how rigidly we are attached to our life as it already is. If we are very attached to everything as it's already constructed into our life, into our existing values and notions of ourselves in a saturnine way that we wish we could preserve forever unchanged, then Uranus will be a shock. Uranus will come along and be unwanted, because we don't want new life, we don't want new change, we just want to embalm everything and keep it fixed and frozen in time to say, this is perfect, this is my paradise, I don't want any angels creeping into it and forcing me out into the land of Nod. Thank you very much. Whereas if we are willing to say, actually, you know, I would be willing to let go of and depart from some of the normalcy of my life if it brought new life with it, then we are more likely to respond to Uranus with open arms, to say, okay, maybe I don't know myself, maybe I don't know what's best for me, maybe I don't know what I want and what I love and where I should be right now. Maybe I should stop being too attached to these definitions of myself and allow myself to grow wings and to let the angels lead me where they want to. It might seem strange, it might seem shocking, it might seem disturbing and traumatizing to what I already think I know and want, but the universe knows more than I do, and I will trust it to guide me into places of greater awareness and happiness. Anyway, that's enough from this bird goddess now. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please share your Venus square Uranus aspects with me, or experiences of Venus-Uranus in general. I looked back over my own experiences of this transit, and it really can range from the full high and low of the spectrum. You know, from just pure shock and disaster to really exciting, energizing experiences to lots of little in-betweens. As I've said before, Uranus thrives on being unpredictable, so there is only so much you can say or pretend about any of his forthcoming aspects, just to be ready to prime yourself for the unexpected. Anyway, please comment, share your stories below. If you want to speak to me more personally, you can email me at thestarsunraveled@outlook.com. You can follow me on Instagram at astrologyinunderwear, and you can support me on Patreon at www.patreon.com/thestarsunraveled. Anyway, I've got to go preen my feathers before I take my next big flight.